Once upon a time, in a town shrouded in eerie silence, my childhood unfolded. It was a desolate place, with nothing but endless farms, forsaken crops, dilapidated churches, and decrepit houses. Poverty clung to every corner, with property taxes that felt like a curse upon the destitute souls residing there. Even our peculiar neighbor, while kind-hearted, exuded an unsettling aura. My family, much like the rest, struggled to make ends meet. But when my siblings and I came of age to work, life took a modest turn for the better. The chilling tale I'm about to recount occurred during the sinister days of early October, when the air was heavy with secrets and the town whispered its ominous stories. Kelly, a girl I met on a long-forgotten app called Hot or Not, had become my companion through those eerie days. Our uneventful town offered little for us to do. We had roamed through the woods, ventured on hikes, and sampled the local cuisine. But on this particular day, we embarked on an unforeseen journey, veering down an unfamiliar road, desperately seeking something new. The atmosphere grew ominously foggy as we arrived at a secluded restaurant. We dined for a while, oblivious to the encroaching darkness. When we departed, the fog had thickened, shrouding the world in an unsettling embrace. Driven by a reckless curiosity, we followed a crudely constructed wooden sign that pointed towards a pumpkin patch hidden behind a foggy curtain. A dirt driveway led us to a peculiar house tucked between a sinister woods and the misty vale. With a surge of audacity, we parked next to a decrepit pickup truck, the only other vehicle present. An elderly couple emerged from the shadows of the house, their unsettling smiles hidden beneath the mist. They greeted us warmly, assuring us that we were welcome to pick any pumpkin we pleased. To our astonishment, they claimed it was all free. Something about their smiles was amiss, particularly the old man's toothless grin, which sent shivers down our spines. We mumbled our thanks and ventured into the soggy, dimly lit patch. The pumpkins were unappealing, damp, and unpleasant. Yet, after much searching, we found a hefty, perfect pumpkin. We returned to the deck, only to find the old couple had vanished into thin air. Our knees crept in, and we contemplated leaving, convinced we had already expressed our gratitude. We retreated to our car, intending to depart, but an agonizing scream pierced the eerie silence. Startled, we turned towards the house to witness a middle-aged man in a cap, his voice trembling with anger. He accused us of wrongdoing and threatened to call 911. We pleaded our innocence, explaining that the elderly couple had permitted us to take a pumpkin. To our bewilderment, he denied their existence, vehemently asserting that he lived alone. Our confusion deepened as we exchanged fearful glances. The man seized our pumpkin and warned that he would shoot us if we ever returned. He spat on the ground and retreated into the darkness of his house. We sped away, confusion and fear enveloping us. Perhaps it was a sick joke, we wondered, but the chilling truth lingered in our minds. What if those elderly figures were not of this world? The car fell into a sullen silence, haunted by that sinister thought. Curiosity eventually got the best of us, and my siblings embarked on a pumpkin-picking expedition to the same farm. They confronted the man, questioning him about the farm's mysteries and the possibility of others living with him. To their horror, he claimed to live alone, leaving an unsettling question lingering in the air. Who were those spectral figures that had welcomed us into their eerie domain? In the dead of night, during the sinister embrace of late October, I received an eerie message from my closest friend, Connor. The request was simple: to join him at his house later. But little did I know, this seemingly innocent invitation would lead me down a harrowing path of terror and darkness. It was a chilling Saturday afternoon, and I was still in high school at the time. Weekends were usually spent with friends, But this particular weekend had something malevolent lurking in the shadows. Connor's parents had left town, leaving him in the care of his older sister, Chantel. But I had a gut feeling that Connor had ulterior motives, and it wasn't long before my suspicions were confirmed. As we ventured into the depths of Connor's dimly lit house, we started with a casual game of Call of Duty. It was an attempt to ward off the impending dread that was slowly creeping into our souls. We discussed school, sports, girls, and everything else that high school kids cared about at the time. Yet, an insidious plan began to take shape in Connor's mind. The conversation soon turned to a Halloween party in Connor's neighborhood, one that promised to be a nightmarish gathering of high school kids. Initially, I hesitated to join in the unholy revelry, but Connor's persuasive charms eventually convinced me to partake in the nightmare. With no time to prepare, we scrambled to piece together makeshift costumes, security staff shirts, the bare minimum for disguises in this malevolent masquerade. As the dark hours drew near, we found ourselves at the doorstep of this accursed house, drenched in ominous Halloween decorations and enveloped by eerie music. The party had begun, and with it, our descent into a nightmarish realm. Inside, the scene was straight out of a horror movie. The air was thick with dread as we mingled with other students, their faces distorted in the flickering shadows. The night unfolded like a waking nightmare, with chilling encounters and ominous conversations. As the evening wore on, fatigue and an overwhelming sense of unease began to gnaw at my sanity. It was clear that the time had come to escape the clutches of this malevolent gathering. I set out to find Connor, discovering him ensnared in conversation with a mysterious girl in the shadowy corners of the kitchen. He granted me permission to leave for his house, which I desperately needed. However, fate had other plans. The girl requested that I fetch drinks from the basement, ensnaring me further in this nightmarish web. With a heavy heart, I descended the creaking stairs into the abyss below. But what awaited me in that subterranean darkness was far more sinister than I could have ever imagined. The basement was cloaked in shadows, and as I reached for a drink in the dim light, a voice echoed from behind. A chilling boo sent shivers down my spine as I turned to face a ghastly figure. Before me stood a man, a sinister spectre dressed in a black cloak costume. His grin was malevolent, and his surprise gesture sent a jolt of terror through me. My slurred speech protested his sudden scare, but my instincts screamed for me to escape this malevolent presence. He introduced himself as the party host's cousin, but his unsettling aura left me deeply disturbed. I desperately needed to return to Connor and put distance between myself and this ominous figure. With a promise of retrieving drinks, I managed to escape his grasp. My heart raced as I ascended the creaky stairs, praying that this nightmarish encounter would end. Exiting the party was a bittersweet relief, and the illuminated streets offered a semblance of safety. But little did I know that the true horror had only just begun. My journey led me back to Connor's house, a dark and eerie abode. Chantel's absence confirmed that I was alone, vulnerable to the shadows that lurked within. In the darkness, I made my way to the basement, where fitful rest awaited me. But the darkness held secrets I could not fathom, and the night was far from over. The crash from upstairs shattered the silence, and my senses sharpened. The air grew tense as ominous footsteps above me echoed through the night. Fear gripped my heart as I realized that something sinister was lurking in the shadows. I knew I had to call for help. Texting Connor, I inquired if he had returned home. As I lay there, every creak of the floorboards above intensified the terror that gripped my soul. When the basement door creaked open and footsteps descended, panic seized me. In the dim light, I saw him, the same man from the party, his malevolence undiminished. I held my breath, praying he would leave. Minutes passed like an eternity, and then he quietly retreated, closing the door behind him. I dialed 911, my voice trembling as I recounted the nightmarish events. Help was on its way, but I was trapped, unable to escape through sealed windows. The nightmarish ordeal had taken a sinister turn, and I could only hope that the authorities would arrive in time. This is a cautionary tale, a chilling reminder to always remain vigilant of your surroundings, especially when darkness descends and malevolence lurks in the shadows. It was the heart of October, and the leaves had begun their mesmerizing transformation, painting the landscape in hues of orange and yellow. My spouse, Courtney, and I, a married couple, were eager to seize the beauty of the fall foliage by heading to the mystical Catskill Mountains in New York. As avid hikers, we often embarked on journeys to explore national parks and famous hiking destinations. This marked our third excursion to Catskill, New York. Our chosen haven was an area situated near the renowned Overlook Mountain, a cherished hiking spot. Our Airbnb host, a sweet woman named Kathy, made our stay effortless. The key to our cozy abode was nestled within a code-locked mailbox, providing access to a rustic cabin-like interior. Wooden walls and floors were complemented by vibrant rugs. It was a well-maintained space, perfect for two. The surrounding area was engulfed by dense woods in every direction. An old shed had been transformed into a small clubhouse outside, adorned with a pool table and dartboard, exuding a sense of rustic charm. Our journey led us to the base of Overlook Mountain Trail, where we encountered a few fellow hikers. As we ascended, we crossed paths with others descending, the occasional exchange of pleasantries adding to the camaraderie. Amidst this breathtaking wilderness, we perched on a colossal rock, overlooking a mesmerizing cliff view. It was a moment of pure tranquility until an unexpected intrusion disrupted our serenity. A solitary woman, around 55 years old, materialized behind us, leaning against a tree. Her intent gaze was unsettling, and her presence felt intrusive. Our polite acknowledgement didn't dissuade her, as she initiated an awkward conversation. Identifying herself as Melinda, she inquired about our origins and offered local insights. The conversation faded, and Courtney and I decided to continue our descent, bidding her farewell. To our astonishment, Melinda seemed to tail us as we resumed our hike. She maintained a discreet distance, raising our suspicion. We opted to halt and observe, waiting for her to move ahead. After a considerable delay, Melinda proceeded further down the trail, her parting glance accompanied by a cryptic "okay." We resumed our journey, but the eerie encounter lingered. As twilight blanketed the woods, we made our way back to the car and returned to our errand. Fatigued from our hike, we planned to unwind with a cozy evening indoors. Our television offered access to Netflix, and we snuggled up, ready for a peaceful night. As the movie played, exhaustion began to lull us into slumber. However, a sudden interruption shattered the tranquility, a series of knocks at the door. In the heart of the woods, such an occurrence was deeply unsettling, and we dared not open the door. With no peephole to assess the situation, we muted the TV and waited. The knocks persisted, each pounding against our nerves. I discreetly messaged Kathy, inquiring if she was at the door. It was then that a sinister knock resonated from one of the windows, accompanied by a woman's voice pleading for entry. Fear surged through us, and we questioned the motives of this unexpected visitor. She attempted to lift the window, but it remained locked. At that moment, Kathy called me, bewildered by the situation. We shared our predicament, and she confirmed that none of her acquaintances would approach our location. Resolutely, we heeded Kathy's advice and refused to open the door. The tension escalated as the unknown visitor knocked on another window, urgently seeking assistance and entry. The situation had devolved into an invasion. Desperate to understand the threat, I cautiously raised a blind to peek outside. In the darkness, a man's figure moved stealthily past the window, oblivious to my presence. Returning to Courtney, I conveyed the unnerving revelation. Multiple individuals lurked outside. We contacted 911, providing our address and remaining on the line. The harrowing ordeal continued with persistent knocking and pleas for entry. The police, though delayed, eventually arrived, offering us much-needed reassurance. Their presence was a relief, and we described the nightmarish events. With their guidance, we contacted Kathy again, explaining our apprehension and reluctance to stay the night. She empathized and cancelled the remainder of our stay. Under the protection of the police, we packed our belongings and relocated to a nearby motel for the night. Fearing the unknown and traumatized by the invasion, we opted to return home the following day. Reflecting on the chilling experience, we speculated that we may have been targeted by a group of individuals seeking easy prey for sinister motives. A woman, possibly acting as a scout, had initiated contact during our hike, leading to this terrifying encounter. In response, we now carry pepper spray for self-defense during our outdoor expeditions. Remember, it's essential to stay vigilant and trust your instincts in unfamiliar situations, especially when you sense danger lurking in the shadows. I'm an 18-year-old guy, and this incident happened back when I was just 12 years old. It took place in a small European country, and these kinds of things were quite unusual there. It was a chilly evening in October, and I was at the local park with two of my friends. The time was around 9 or 10 p.m., and we were simply having a good time, hanging out on a park bench. Not too far away, some older kids were engrossed in a game of soccer. As we chatted away, something caught my eye. I happened to turn around and noticed 3 or 4 guys sitting on another bench roughly 10 meters behind us. Now, at first glance, this didn't seem out of the ordinary. However, what struck me as odd was that every single one of them had their eyes locked onto us when I made eye contact. I mentioned this strange observation to my friends, and they turned around to check it out. To our surprise, those guys were still watching us intently. They were huddled together, talking among themselves and sharing occasional bursts of laughter. Now, let me provide a little context. My 2 friends and I were just a bunch of young boys, while these guys were at least 3 years older than us. In a situation where things might take a wrong turn, we knew we wouldn't stand a chance in a physical confrontation with them. Despite that, a few more minutes passed, and we continued to keep an eye on them. Suddenly, those guys got up from their bench in a hurry, and that's when alarm bells started ringing in our heads. Without hesitation, we all stood up and began walking briskly towards a nearby building. It was one of my friend's residences, and it had an intercom system. Our plan was to get inside and lock the door, securing our safety. As we walked quickly towards the building, we heard one of the guys shout, "Hey," but we didn't dare turn around. Our hearts pounded, and we picked up our pace. A moment later, we heard another shout, even louder and closer this time. That's when we finally turned around, and there they were. Those guys were now running toward us. Panic set in, and we started sprinting towards the building. Luckily, we reached the building just in the nick of time. My friend managed to unlock the door with his key, and we rushed inside, slamming the door shut behind us. Outside, those guys began banging on the glass panel of the door, shouting and demanding that we let them in. Their threats grew more menacing as they vowed to harm us. Inside the building, the darkness shielded us from their view, and we found a hiding spot behind some bicycles that were stored in the hallway. We could hear their aggressive threats through the door, and it was clear that these guys had a reputation for causing trouble around town. Interestingly, one of my friends had an older brother who had dealt with these guys before, and he wasn't pleased with their presence. Our friend, the one with the older brother, wasn't with us on that fateful night. However, he and his brother were both skilled in karate and had a reputation for being formidable fighters. When our friend heard about the situation, He immediately called his older brother, who was about 18 years old at the time. The next day after school, our friend invited us to the park to show us something. When we arrived, we couldn't believe our eyes. There, lying on the ground, were all those guys who had been chasing us the previous night. It turned out that our friend's older brother, along with some of his friends, had confronted and fought those guys, sending a clear message that they were not to be messed with. In the end, you could say it was a happy ending for us. We had escaped a potentially dangerous situation thanks to the bravery and skills of our friend's older brother and his friends. It was a lesson learned about staying vigilant and looking out for one another even in seemingly safe surroundings. Hey there, everyone! Today, I want to share a spooky and unforgettable story from my childhood that happened in my favorite month of the year, October. Now, October is that sweet spot temperature-wise, right? It's never too hot and never too cold. The leaves start turning those beautiful shades of orange and brown, and you get that nice, refreshing October breeze. As a kid, my friends and I absolutely loved October. We had this tradition where we would rake up all those fallen leaves into a massive pile and have epic wrestling matches right in the middle of it. Picture this: a bunch of young spirited kids, ages 9 to 12, tumbling around in a sea of leaves. One year, when I was around 10 or 11, it was late October, and most of the leaves had already fallen from the trees. Now, I should mention that my house was quite large, and my buddies Liam and Billy were helping me rake up the leaves into this giant pile. It was a cloudy, windy day, and it was getting late. You see, our house was situated on a corner, and right next to the sidewalk was this short dead-end street with only 2 houses. One of them belonged to an elderly couple who didn't seem to care much about what was happening around them. Across the street was a small, disheveled house, and its owner rarely made an appearance outside. This setting gave us the freedom to be a little louder and more obnoxious than usual without worrying about neighbors. So, back to our wrestling match. We tussled around for about half an hour, but this time something felt off. The leaf pile seemed smaller than we remembered. We decided to grab our rakes and start building it up again. That's when Liam spotted a long, oddly shaped pile of leaves that we hadn't noticed before. Curiosity piqued, he went over to rake it into our main pile, but he seemed to be having trouble, and he yelled, "There's something under the leaves." We rushed over to help him clear the leaves away, and to our shock, we found a grown man hiding underneath. We all screamed and stepped back, not sure if this was some kind of early Halloween prank. The man's face was hidden beneath the leaves, adding to the eerie atmosphere. Eventually, Billy mustered the courage to approach the figure and began clearing the leaves away from its face. To our astonishment, the body turned out to be hollow and rigid. It was a fake body. But this bizarre discovery raised another question: who had placed it there? Our answer came swiftly when we noticed someone hiding in the bushes behind the pile. We yelled, "We see you!" and the man hiding there emerged, laughing heartily. He explained that he had planted the fake body because he enjoyed watching us play in the leaves and thought it would be a hilarious prank. Now, we were somewhat relieved, but also creeped out by how he mentioned he always watched us. Liam decided to be friendly, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this man was just plain weird. I suggested we all go inside, and we left the man to his devices. Later, I told my dad about the odd encounter, and he decided to investigate. However, when he went outside, the fake body had already disappeared. We spent the rest of the evening playing video games, all agreeing that the guy was just a total freak. My friends eventually left, and I went to my room with my window open, as usual, to let in some fresh air. I was watching TV when suddenly I heard a man's voice at my window. I jumped in alarm and looked up, but I couldn't see who it was. The voice said, "I didn't mean to creep you out earlier. I live in the house across the street." I was in shock, hearing a stranger's voice outside my window. Eventually, the man's familiar face came into view as he tried to climb inside. Thankfully, he couldn't fit through the window, but he started reaching for me. I screamed for my dad and ran to his room, pulling him back to my window. By the time we got there, the man had disappeared. We rushed over to the house across the street, banged on the door, but there was no answer. My dad decided to call the police, and when they arrived, they went to the house with me. This time the man answered the door, and it was indeed the same guy. The police and my dad instantly noticed that something was off about him. It turned out he was likely on crystal meth, which explained his bizarre behavior. I remember peeking into the house and seeing that it was an absolute mess, which in hindsight fit the description of a typical meth user's home. So there you have it, folks, a spine-tingling tale from my childhood, filled with strange encounters and eerie coincidences, all happening right in the heart of our beloved October. It's a story I'll never forget, and it serves as a reminder to always stay cautious, no matter how familiar your surroundings may seem. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more intriguing tales and content. And as always, stay safe out there, especially during the spooky month of October. Thanks for tuning in. Hey there, folks. Today, I've got a spine-tingling story from this past October that you won't believe. It all starts with a girl I met at a party about a month prior. We'll call her Nikki. We have been chatting and hanging out, getting to know each other over the weeks. Nikki was all about embracing the October spirit, so I came up with a brilliant idea: apple picking. Now, we live in Jersey, and there are plenty of apple orchards around, so we hit the road for a half-hour drive to the countryside, leaving the suburbs behind. Little did we know, our adventure would take an unexpected turn. As we cruised down a scenic, traffic-free road, we passed what seemed to be another apple orchard. Nikki, feeling adventurous, decided to turn down a dirt road that led to a quaint wooden farmhouse. Oddly enough, there were no cars, no people, not even a ticket booth in sight. It appeared abandoned, or maybe it simply wasn't open to the public. The house itself was in shambles, adding to the eerie atmosphere. Nikki felt uncomfortable, and we decided to leave and head to our originally planned destination. However, when we got there, it was equally devoid of people, albeit with a closed sign. That's when I had an idea. I suggested we return to that first orchard that looked almost abandoned. Imagine having the whole place to ourselves, I said, trying to convince Nikki. She hesitated at first, but eventually I won her over. So we drove back, found a discreet spot to park by the woods, and embarked on our uncharted adventure. Walking on the dirt path, we tried to be sneaky, but that plan quickly fell apart. We had to hop over a little wooden fence, but that was a piece of cake. Once inside, we were hidden by rows of thick apple trees, but the grass was tall, up to our shins. We began filling plastic bags with the juiciest apples we could find. Though I'll admit, there weren't many. There was a thrill in knowing we were doing something we weren't supposed to. I couldn't resist launching apples into the air, pretending to throw them at Nikki, who'd scream and run off. It was all fun and games until Nikki, while picking her own apples, suddenly disappeared from sight. "Where are you?" I called out. Her response, seemingly from a few rows away, reassured me. But when I went to find her, things took a spooky turn. Apples began landing around me, tossed from nearby rows. I shouted for whoever was throwing them to stop, fearing one would hit me. As I navigated through the trees, my heart leaped into my throat. There he was, a young guy with long shoulder-length black hair, standing in the road just a few trees away. He had a subtle smirk on his face and didn't move a muscle. I backed away and decided to escape through the rows, desperately searching for Nikki. I called her in a panic, and she whispered frantically over the phone. She was being followed by this creepy guy who wouldn't respond to her questions. His description matched the guy I had just encountered. I told her to meet me back at the car, and I sprinted back. Nikki was already at the car waiting, but as we discussed what had just happened, we spotted him again, half hidden by an apple tree spying on us. We had to get out of there. I executed a swift three-point turn off the grass onto the dirt road. We passed the decrepit farmhouse and got back on the main road, our minds racing with possibilities. Maybe he lived there. We spotted a fruit stand and decided to stop since we lost our bags of apples. We picked up some apples and berries and couldn't resist asking the people at the stand about the mysterious orchard. They told us a chilling story. The owner's son had killed his girlfriend and then disappeared. Her body was found near the orchard. The dad still owned the place, but he hardly ever returned, and he wasn't cooperating with the police. We couldn't believe it. We confessed that we had been apple picking there, and the two ladies scolded us for not calling the police. They insisted that it was best we got out of there when we did. One of them even said she would alert the police. As Nikki and I headed home, she tried talking to me about the incident, but I couldn't shake the thought that we had potentially come face to face with a missing murderer in that eerie apple orchard. The experience still gives me chills, and I can't help but wonder if that guy is still lurking out there, hidden in those rows of trees. So, there you have it, a real-life October thriller. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more hair-raising tales and exciting content. And remember, the world can be full of unexpected surprises, especially during the spooky season of October. Thanks for tuning in.